Title: They Said Kids Can't Be Evil, Until These Stories Prove Them Wrong. The knock at 9 p.m. It started on a night that was colder than it should have been for February. You know the kind, where the air outside feels thick, the lights from nearby houses seem dimmer than usual, and the silence is just a little too complete. I was alone that night, scrolling half-heartedly through my phone, when I heard it. A knock. 3 polite rhythmic taps at the front door. Now, that shouldn't have been strange. People knock on doors all the time, but it was February, and the knock came with a small, sing-song voice. Trick or treat. At first, I thought I misheard it. Maybe a neighbor's kid playing a prank, or someone lost in the wrong season. But when I opened the door, there he was, a child, small, maybe 6 years old, wearing a ghost costume made of a white sheet that looked a bit too old to be store-bought. It was cut unevenly, frayed near the edges, and the holes for the eyes were off-center, like someone had done it by hand. He stood on my porch holding a battered orange pumpkin pail, the kind kids use on Halloween. His voice was muffled beneath the sheet. Trick or treat, he said again, polite but insistent. It was oddly endearing, if not for the fact that it was happening on a random Friday in February. I remember glancing around, expecting to see parents, maybe a car waiting by the curb. But there was no one, just the boy, the dark road behind him, and the faint sound of winter wind pushing through the bare trees. Still, I smiled and played along. "Well," I said, "you're a little early for Halloween, buddy." He tilted his head as if he didn't understand, then shook the bucket gently, making the few pieces of candy inside rattle. That's when I noticed something. There was already candy in there. My neighbors must have answered the same knock. Now, I lived in one of those quiet rural neighborhoods where the houses are spread far apart. You can see porch lights dotting the hills at night, but it's not exactly a trick-or-treating paradise. For a kid that small to walk around alone like that, it was strange. Still, something about the scene made me want to play along. Maybe it was his enthusiasm. Maybe it was just the loneliness that creeps in when you live by yourself. So I told him to wait on the porch, went to the kitchen, and grabbed a bag of Reese's Pieces from the pantry. When I came back, I dropped a handful into his pumpkin. "Here you go, pal," I said, smiling. He nodded once, polite as ever, and said, "See you tomorrow, mister." That made me pause. Tomorrow? I chuckled awkwardly. "Oh, are you making your rounds again?" But he didn't respond. Just turned, stepped off the porch, and disappeared into the night. The little white sheet bobbing down the driveway until the darkness swallowed him. The next day, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way he'd said, "See you tomorrow." Maybe it was just a kid's joke. Maybe some local parent thought it'd be cute to let their kid do an out-of-season trick-or-treat routine. But something didn't sit right with me. That evening, I even checked with one of my neighbors, a retired couple down the road. They hadn't seen or heard anything. So I laughed it off, bought a few extra candy bags at the grocery store, and told myself that if the kid came back, I'd be prepared. Sure enough, 9 p.m. on the dot, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there he was again. Same little ghost costume, same small figure, same battered pumpkin pail. "Trick or treat, mister." His timing was perfect, almost mechanical. I smiled and dropped some candy into his bucket. He nodded and said the same line, in the same tone. "See you tomorrow, mister." And once again, he walked off in tow. Oh, the night, disappearing beyond the glow of the streetlight. It became a routine. Every night at 9 p.m., the doorbell would ring. Every night, the little ghost boy would be there, polite, soft-spoken, and precise. And every night, he would end with that same phrase, "See you tomorrow, mister." By the 4th night, I was starting to feel a strange combination of amusement and unease. It wasn't scary, not yet, just weird, repetitive. The kind of weird that slowly chips away at logic until you can't tell whether you're imagining things or not. I even started preparing for him, placing a small bowl of candy on the entry table at 8:55, waiting for the doorbell like it was part of my routine. But by the 7th night, it had gone from novelty to annoyance. That Friday, I remember I was exhausted. My girlfriend was coming back into town the next morning, and I had to wake up at 4 a.m. to pick her up from the airport. I had promised myself that if the kid showed up again, I'd finally say something, maybe even talk to his parents if I could figure out where he lived. So when the doorbell rang at exactly 9 p.m., I took a deep breath and opened the door. "Trick or treat," he said. Same voice, same calm tone. His bucket was nearly full this time, a mix of candy types, probably from other homes nearby. I gave him a half smile, a little sharper than usual. "All right, kid, you've had your fun." He tilted his head. "Huh?" I sighed. "You know it's not Halloween, right? This is February. You can't just go trick-or-treating whenever you feel like it." The boy's head lowered slightly. Through the thin sheet, I could see the faint outline of his hands gripping the pumpkin handle tighter. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "You weren't supposed to ask that." A chill slid through me. "What?" I said quietly. The boy lifted his head, and though I couldn't see his eyes, I could feel them. Something about that silence between us turned the air heavy. And then, from somewhere off to my right, came the soft creak of the porch railing. I turned toward the sound, heart thudding. Someone else was there, a shadow, taller, older. Before I could process it, the boy spoke again, but his tone had changed. He was laughing now. That was the last thing I remember clearly from that night before everything spiraled into chaos. A single line echoing through my mind. "You weren't supposed to ask that." The next chapter would teach me why. The visitors return. When something strange happens once, you can call it a coincidence. When it happens twice, maybe you're being dramatic. But when it happens over and over, night after night, and the world outside feels colder every time, that's when you start to wonder if something's watching you. The morning after that last visit, I couldn't shake the kid's words. "You weren't supposed to ask that." It looped in my head as I brushed my teeth, drove to the store, even as I tried to laugh it off with coworkers over coffee. They said I was overthinking it, just some neighborhood prankster with too much time. But every time I replayed that moment, his small figure, the tilt of his head, the sudden tension in the air, it didn't feel like a prank. It felt like a warning. I told myself I was done with it. No more candy, no more door answering. If he showed up again, I'd keep the lights off, pretend I wasn't home, and wait it out. That night, I turned off the porch light before 9. Then I sat in my living room, pretending to scroll through my phone, but mostly staring at the clock. 57.8, 58.8, 59. And then, right on cue, the doorbell rang. A single ding-dong, crisp and clear. My stomach sank. The sound echoed in the quiet house, sharp against the silence. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The second ring came 15 seconds later, slower this time, like whoever was out there knew I was home. Then, nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the wind outside. I waited. 5 minutes, 10. Then finally, curiosity won. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. Empty porch, no kid, no ghost costume, no pumpkin bucket. But something was there. On the doormat sat a single piece of wrapped candy. Reese's Pieces, the same kind I'd given him that first night. My heart picked up speed. I opened the door slowly and looked around. The yard was still, the street dark and empty. The candy was the only thing out of place, a tiny, harmless object that suddenly felt heavy with meaning. I picked it up and turned it in my hand. The wrapper had been folded perfectly, too perfect almost. Then, just as I was about to close the door, I noticed something else. A faint scuff mark near the edge of the porch, a partial footprint, too large for a child. I didn't sleep much that night. By the next day, I'd talked myself into a dozen explanations. Maybe the kid's older brother or father had come along. Maybe the scuff was mine from earlier. Maybe the candy was just dropped, not placed. But no matter how much logic I piled on top, it didn't cover the feeling underneath, that I was being watched. That night, I kept the house dark again, curtains closed, phone flashlight ready, just in case. 6 p.m. came. Then 9:05. No doorbell. For a moment, I almost felt relieved. Maybe it really was over. Maybe the kid finally got bored. And then I heard it. A soft scraping sound against the window. Not tapping. Scraping, slow, careful, deliberate. I froze. Every sound in the house seemed amplified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, my own pulse in my ears. I reached for my phone, switched the flashlight on, and pointed it toward the window. Nothing. Just the reflection of my living room staring back at me. Then, behind my reflection, movement. A small white shape sliding past the edge of the glass. I jumped back. The flashlight clattered to the floor. When I finally gathered enough nerve to peek outside, the yard was empty again. In no footprints in the thin dusting of frost on the ground. No sign of anyone. I told myself I was imagining things. Stress, exhaustion, paranoia. I tried to sleep. I really did. But at 3 a.m., I woke to the faint sound of laughter. Not close, not loud, just far enough away to make me wonder if I was dreaming. Morning came with gray skies and dull light. My girlfriend texted to say she'd landed early, and for a brief moment, everything felt normal again. A quick shower, a cup of coffee, the familiar routine of driving to the airport. When she got in the car, she could tell something was off. "You look like you haven't slept," she said. I laughed it off. "Weird week, I'll tell you later." And I meant to. But when we got back home, everything was quiet. The house felt lighter somehow. The porch was empty, the morning sun cutting through the fog. So I didn't bring it up, not yet. That evening, after dinner, we watched TV and talked about her trip. For the first time in days, I let my guard down. Then, at 9 p.m. sharp, the doorbell rang. We both froze. I looked at her. She frowned. Expecting someone, my throat was dry. "No." She muted the TV. The doorbell rang again. I stood up slowly, every muscle in my body tensing. When I reached the door, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the knob. "Maybe it's a delivery," she said quietly. I nodded, more to convince myself than her. I opened the door just enough to see, and there he was. The same small ghost costume, the same pumpkin pail, the same stillness. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, head tilted slightly upward. Then, in that same flat, polite voice, he said, "Trick or treat, mister." My girlfriend stepped into the hallway behind me, whispering, "Is that a kid? At this hour?" Before I could answer, the boy shook his pumpkin bucket. It was full, nearly overflowing. Then he tilted his head again and said, "You weren't supposed to ask." My girlfriend's hand found my arm. "Ask what?" she whispered. But the boy didn't reply. Instead, from somewhere just beyond the porch, the same side as before, came the faint sound of a footstep. He wasn't alone. For a split second, I caught movement in my peripheral vision, a taller shadow stepping into the edge of the porch light. That's when I realized this wasn't about candy anymore. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My girlfriend was already on the phone, calling for help. Outside, the laughter came again. Two voices this time, one light, one older. They didn't try the door. They didn't run. They just stood there, waiting. When the police arrived 15 minutes later, they searched the property. Nothing. No footprints, no figures. Just a faint trail of candy scattered down the driveway, like breadcrumbs leading into the woods. One of the officers looked uneasy. "We've had 2 other calls like this in the last few months," he said. "Different neighborhoods, same description." I asked him what he meant. He just shook his head. "Kid in a ghost costume, always with someone older nearby. They knock, they scare, then vanish. Nobody's caught them yet." Before leaving, he added something that stuck with me long after they'd gone. "If it happens again, don't open the door." That night, I barely slept. Every creak, every gust of wind outside sounded like footsteps. And when I finally drifted off just before dawn, I had a dream of a small ghost standing at the foot of my bed, whispering the same words over and over. "You weren't supposed to ask that." The truth about the ghost kid. By the time the sun came up, I'd already made my decision. No more waiting, no more hoping it would stop. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to sleep another night until I had them. The police had already brushed it off as copycat pranks. But something about that didn't fit. The timing, the behavior, the precision. Every night at 9 p.m., not a minute early or late, and always the same phrase. "You weren't supposed to ask that." 1. The research. I started digging through local forums and community boards. There were a few scattered posts about the ghost kid, going back nearly a year. One woman in a nearby county said a boy in a ghost costume came to her house weeks after Halloween asking for candy. She thought it was a prank until her husband chased after the boy and he disappeared into the woods. No footprints, no sound, just gone. Another post mentioned a similar thing, a masked trick-or-treater showing up out of season, always with a quiet voice, always polite. The strangest part? Each post mentioned a different small town, but the same time, 9 p.m., different dates, same moment. It wasn't a local prank, it was something bigger, too, the neighbor's secret. That afternoon, I decided to check in with my neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He'd lived on the street for decades, a quiet man with a huge front porch and too many garden gnomes. When I brought up the kid, his face went pale. "You saw him too?" he said softly. I nodded. "Yeah, ghost costume, candy bucket, little kid, maybe 6 years old." He rubbed the back of his neck and looked toward the woods. "That kid's been around for a long time." I frowned. "What do you mean? Like, years?" He nodded slowly. "First time I saw him, it was 2007. Same costume, same time at night. I gave him a chocolate bar. He said, 'See you tomorrow, mister.' Never came back. Week later, a man got beaten half to death 2 streets over. My mouth went dry. You think it's the same kid?" He looked me dead in the eye. "I know it is, and I don't think he's a kid anymore." 3. The file. Amal. That night, I called the detective who had handled my case. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, I asked him directly, "What do you really know about the ghost kid?" He sighed. "I shouldn't tell you this," he said, "but since you were one of the victims, you deserve to know." Apparently, the department had an unofficial file, one that wasn't on public record. It contained reports going back almost 20 years.